Well, thank you so much, Debbie. And my thanks as well, of course, to the Q Society for hosting me on this, my first trip to Australia. It's been wonderful so far. We began in Perth about a week ago, then went to Melbourne, and now here we are in Sydney before finally a last stop this weekend in Brisbane before going back home again. So a wonderful first introduction to Australia, and I've had a marvelous welcome from everyone so far. Thank you very much for being here tonight and for joining us in this important program. Certainly share your concerns, and I think as I talk tonight, you'll see that the way we look at things over in the United States and the situation over in the United States is in a lot of ways quite similar to what you're looking at here in Australia. So what I thought I would do here tonight is to give you some of the background. I'm sure you probably, many of you know a lot of what I'm going to cover tonight, but let it be a bit of a review. Where this all comes from. You know, Michael was talking about all of the advances of Sharia and the indicators of Muslim society and the agenda moving into Australian society. Well, we've got the same thing going on in the United States. But what I'm going to start with here tonight is where that comes from, what it's based on. Why is it that you can go from the United States to Europe to Canada to Australia, and that agenda, that program, those activities are the same. It's the same thing. Why? Where does that come from? So that's the first thing I'll give you, a little bit of background. And then I want to talk about some of the more current events. Michael alluded to what's going on in the Middle East, of course, with the Islamic State and so forth. And you'll see after we finish the foundation background stuff, how that undergirds what is going on in the Middle East right now. Why what is going on in the Middle East right now is not an anomaly. It's not something out of the ordinary, but rather absolutely, totally within the tradition of Islam for 1,300 plus years. And I will finish, hopefully, by giving you maybe a little bit of hope with a few suggestions for what we can all do about this. So let me begin here. Debbie, whoops, that's the wrong way. There we go. Debbie mentioned some of these things to you. This is just a little visual of some of my own background. But suffice to say, the first part of my career was spent with the Central Intelligence Agency, although nothing to do with Middle East or Islam for those 20 years. I was actually focused on the Soviet Union, Russia, weapons of mass destruction and so forth, but turned to the Middle East and a study of Islam, a deep dive into Islam after the attacks of 9/11. More recently, though, now and for the past 14 years, I have been in the private sector, and I work now in the policy community of Washington, D.C. in the United States. As Debbie mentioned, I work with a think tank called the Center for Security Policy. That is, I don't know if you have think tanks here per se, but it is a nonprofit organization that is both academic in nature and also activist. And so the academic part of it is scholars affiliated with it that write and speak and broadcast and so forth. And the activist part of it is that we try to get out and talk to people. We do a lot of briefing up on our own Capitol Hill with our congressional members and try to inform people. So that's the activist part. All right. I want to mention first, we have the, okay, books that I rely upon when I talk to you about these subjects. I do not have any kind of degree in Islamic studies. I have studied all of it, and the Quran and the Hadiths and the Sharia, the Sirat, that is the biography of Muhammad and so forth. But I don't have a degree in any of that. And so when I talk about this, I've got to rely and reference to you the original source material that it comes from. So if I'm saying something to you, I'm going to source it to an original source, typically, and most often if I can, to an Islamic source. It won't be from some Western university professor someplace. But this book, let me mention first, is one that I had the privilege of editing. And so this book was published about 4 years ago by my think tank, the Center for Security Policy. It is dedicated to an explanation of what is Sharia, what is Islamic law, and then the second half of it is about the Muslim Brotherhood, which certainly in the United States, Canada, Europe, to some extent I think here, but perhaps less so, acts as the vanguard for the infiltration, the insinuation of Sharia into our societies and indeed even our legal system. So I want to recommend this book to you. Back in the back at the conclusion of the program tonight, there is a table where books as well as
books and
some various books are for sale. This particular book is available back there on a small thumb drive. I've loaded several different publications, we'll talk about a couple more, onto thumb drives that I think might be useful for you, which are available for purchase in the back, and this book is. All right, to begin with, obviously, the Quran. We can't talk about Islam without talking about the Quran. That is the very first, work of reference that has to be read and studied and mastered. So this is the particular volume that I use. There are various different volumes and translations, but this happens to be the one that I use. The next thing that you need is a book of law. This happens to be the one that I like the best because it is so clear and easy in the way that it is divided into chapters with headings like jihad, lying, and so forth. As well, these books are available at a very inexpensive price. I buy most of my books used on Amazon.com. Otherwise, I'd be bankrupt for the number of books I've got in my house. But this one is available on Amazon, and it is the book of law that I use most often as a reference. It is Sunni law, but let me tell you that between Sunni law and Shiite law, there's not a whole lot of difference on the major topics like jihad. There's not a sliver of difference between them. On minor things, and certainly the most major difference between Sunni and Shiite is, of course, who followed Muhammad, who got to be the successor to Muhammad. And that has, divided these communities all down the centuries. But in terms of the major issues, death to apostates and homosexuals and adulterers, Jew hatred, and of course jihad, these doctrines are common to both Shiites and Sunnis. But in any case, this is a book of Sunni law. All right, so here is another one that I'd like to recommend, and it's a small book. It is, you're looking at two different covers of the same book. That's the same book there. Milestones, it's called. It's written by Sayyid Qutb. Sayyid Qutb was one of the foremost theoreticians of the Muslim Brotherhood, Egyptian, was executed by the Egyptian government in 1966, but he wrote this book in the early 1960s while in jail. And it's important because it lays out the premise, the doctrine, with the right references back to the scriptures and the law of Islam for jihad in the modern era. And I will tell you that I have trained and taught, been an instructor to United States military personnel for a number of years, and they will tell me that on the battlefields, Iraq, Afghanistan, when they capture and kill bad guys, this book, in whichever translation, Arabic probably most often, it's in their pockets, it's in their backpacks. This is their manual. That's why I recommend it to you. The word milestones basically refers to the posts that are on like an interstate highway, where they mark off the miles, or kilometers would be for you. But the point being that Islam is to be introduced into any community gradually, step by step, milepost by milepost. That's what that's about, and that characterizes the approach of the Muslim Brotherhood, why it's so important. Another document you're going to find on that little thumb drive in the back there is this very short article. It was published in Der Spiegel, which is a German publication, 9 years ago in 2005, and it was the interview of one of the top leadership figures of Al-Qaeda. His name is Saif al-Adil. He's the head military commander of the Al-Qaeda unit that's been operating out of Iran ever since 9/11. They got the interview with him, and he laid out the 7 phases of conquest. In 2005, let's see, here they are. Look in the middle there, the yellow highlighted ones, because I think that's kind of where we are right now. 2010 till 13, it says that was the period for the collapse of the so-called hated Arab governments. A lot of people call that an Arab Spring. They called it collapse of the hated Arab governments. Why were they hated? They were hated because they did not enforce Sharia. What happened in those years? Ben Ali of Tunisia, Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, Hosni Mubarak in Egypt went down. Also Saleh, the leader of Yemen. Thereafter, Bashar al-Assad, he's not been so easy to take down, but that is another one. This phase, the next phase, 2013 until 16, that's the time period we're in right now, obviously. And look what they wrote. What's the period? It's the period for the declaration of the Caliphate. Are these guys absolutely on timeline, on target? This was written 9 years ago. You want to guess how many of our senior national security officials even know this article, this interview was published? I don't know, but I have my doubts. All right, in the words of our enemy, here is Ayman al-Zawahiri. He is now the head of Al-Qaeda. At the time of this quote, he was the deputy to Osama bin Laden. He's speaking in the year 2008, November, right after our presidential elections when Barack Obama was elected. He didn't take office, one moment if you would, he didn't take office until January. We always inaugurate our presidents in a January, but he had been elected and everybody knew that he would be president.
Well, understanding what you said in relation to the Arab Spring, you said that there was an overthrow because the heads of the government, or the heads of their governments, didn't enforce Sharia law. So why did the American government support the Arab Spring?
Let's keep going here. As I describe this, I want to lead into how the American government became infiltrated and influenced by the Muslim Brotherhood in particular in the United States. That is what happened to our government. We'll get to that as we go forward.
We'll take questions at the
In
end.
there, yeah, we will. I'll make sure I'll
plenty of time for
answer as
questions.
many as
Wait,
you have.
Listen.
So anyway, Ayman al-Zawahiri speaking in November of 2008, and look what he says again, the highlighted words here. He is speaking directly to Obama, and he says, "You are facing a jihadi awakening, but you refuse to recognize it, and you pretend not to see." Does that sum up the situation? Exactly, in our country at least. All right, this little diagram is the way I want to illustrate the onslaught of jihad and Sharia. Up at the top, is this a pointer as well? Does it go red? Oops, no it doesn't. No, it's okay. Never mind, but look at the top row there. And off to the left-hand side again, there's Ayman al-Zawahiri. He is, of course, the head of Al-Qaeda now. In the middle is Hassan Rouhani. He is the new, since last year, president of Iran. And then over on the right-hand side is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the head of the Islamic State. Obviously, it's very clear that they are pounding on us. They're coming for us. They've already hit us in many ways. But the onslaught from them is direct, it's visible, it's kinetic in many cases. What I want to emphasize, and really with this whole presentation, is that that's not the only onslaught facing us. The rest of it is coming at us from the sides and from underneath. So over here on this side, I have got on the left a little photograph there of Hassan al-Banna, who is the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood. That's coming at us, in particular, United States and Europe, Canada. Over on the right-hand side is that book of law that I use, so I'm saying Sharia is coming at us. And then through the back door, a term that really kind of encompasses both of those, and that is stealth jihad, a term really coined, I think, by Robert Spencer, who I think perhaps has addressed you previously, and is just absolutely brilliant on these topics. But that totality is what's coming at us. It is a whole of society assault. It is not just kinetic. It is not just blowing things up and killing people and making pyramids of skulls like Genghis Khan. That's not what they're about. They are about conquest to what? These are the objectives. The objectives of Al-Qaeda, the objectives of the Islamic State, and the objectives of every single other Islamic jihad organization in the world, be it Hamas, Hezbollah, Taliban, Lashkar-e-Toiba, you name it. These are their objectives. They only want two things. They want the establishment of Islamic government, meaning a caliphate, right? And the enforcement of Sharia, Islamic law. Just two things, caliphate and Sharia. That is universal to every single jihad organization on earth. So why do they hate us? After 9/11, especially in the United States, we heard this question over and over again. Why did they do this? Why did they hate us? Well, the reason is that as long as there are free and democratic and liberal societies on earth, we represent a barrier to their objective that I just talked about, which is global subjugation to Sharia. As long as any of us exist as free people, as free societies, that blocks their universal objectives. That's why they hate us, because we stand in the way of what they think is a divinely ordained mission. And they do. They really think that that Allah wants them to do this. It's not just superficial, made it up. So around the edges of this slide, I've got a number of flags and logos just to go through them a little quickly. Up in the left-hand top, that's the flag of Iran. On the right-hand top, that is the flag of Hezbollah. In the middle down here, green flag with the white letters, that is the flag of Saudi Arabia. And the letters are stylized calligraphy in Arabic. It says, La ilaha illallah. And what that means is there is no God but Allah. That is the Shahada. That is the statement of faith in Islam. It is the statement of profession of faith. If a person is converting into Islam, it is on the flag of Saudi Arabia. And just in case you didn't get the point, there's a sword underneath. The round logo next to that, a shield kind of, is the logo of the Muslim Brotherhood. We're going to look at that some more in a bit. You'll see it in different styles, but that's one. The black flag underneath, you'll hear this often called the black flag of Al-Qaeda, or maybe the black flag of ISIS or something. That is the black flag of jihad. Long and short of it, that is the black flag of Islamic jihad. And it too has the same phrase on it in Arabic as the Saudi flag there, La ilaha illallah. And I think, yeah, it's the whole thing, La ilaha illallah wa Muhammad Rasulullah, which is, there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. That is the full statement of faith in Islam. The bottom flag is the flag of Pakistan. All right, we can see that Sharia is advancing on a lot of fronts around the world. Not just the Middle East, but here in Australia, in Europe, in Canada, in the United States for sure. MENA stands for Middle East, North Africa. There and in the Middle East, the advance of Sharia has reached the violent stage. It is the final push. It is the ethnic cleansing of the original indigenous peoples of that region. That's by revolution. And in the West, so far, it is what the Muslim Brotherhood uses the term itself, civilization jihad. There's another document you're going to see if you take a look at that thumb drive in the back. And the document is called the Explanatory Memorandum. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but that's where that phrase comes from, civilization jihad. And it is a phrase that was coined by the Muslim Brotherhood itself, and it means the infiltration by stealth and by guile of a Western civilization without or preceding the final violent push. It is not violent yet, so we would call it perhaps pre-violent. All right, Muslim Brotherhood. Here is what's going on in our society and how American policy got to be what American policy is that you see today. Muslim brothers began to infiltrate the West shortly after World War II. It goes back that far. And little by little, they infiltrated our society in all different spheres, academia, media, government, intelligence. And today in the United States, they operate as advisors and appointees at the very highest levels of the